For years now, we have talked about doing a show dedicated to our opinions of cryptids. So this is not our normal format at all. This is a format we are calling Cryptids Unscripted. We have always wanted to keep things extremely structured for our channel.
100% scripted.
Yes. But we have opinions too. And so why should we let all this great cryptid goodness go to waste? Because we cover a lot of cryptids typically really fast. And it's like, maybe we should spend a little extra time on each of these. So we're playing around with this format called Cryptids Unscripted, where after we release a episode that is scripted, we will also additionally release an unscripted version where we discuss in more detail the cryptids that we covered. And we are starting this off with our very last cryptid that Elaine did her story on, the Mogollon monster.
Mogollon monster.
Mogollon monster, not the Mogollon monster, no matter how it's spelled, because my brain wants to say Mogollon every time I read it.
Mogollon. That's what I thought it was at first.
Yeah, so it's not that. So first of all, let's just open this up. Elaine, what drew you to this story? I know we go through a lot of cryptids. I know a lot of times what draws us to our story is we just have to find more cryptids to talk about. We've covered, dozens of cryptids at this point, which we may need to go back and do some episodes like this just to go back over some of our favorites. But what about the Mogollon monster really stood out to you? And then I have some really weird stuff that I kind of feel about this. Well, very quickly, what is the Mogollon monster? And if you haven't watched the full episode yet, that, our normal Cryptids Across the Atlas episodes, go back and watch that. It's linked in the show notes. We'll put it wherever the card, probably over there. We'll put a card up so you can go and watch that. Watch that first.
This is the episode before this one.
Yes, and this is a debriefing on that. So, Elaine, Mogollon monster. Go ahead, give me your initial thoughts.
So the reason why I even found this cryptid in the first place was because when we first started Cryptids Across the Atlas, we wanted to not just do US cryptids, but we wanted to do international cryptids. So we used to have a format where we would have a US cryptid and then the next cryptid would be an international one. And we haven't followed that strict format in a while. We still try to incorporate outside countries into them. But I will say one of the harder things that whenever you start exploring cryptids, it's harder to find international cryptids, or at least a lot of stories behind them. So US-based cryptid stories still have a lot more meat to them, at least from what I have found in my research.
Can I butt in real quick?
Yeah.
So a big part of that too, a lot of your European cryptids are more folk in tradition, you have your Fey realm type stuff. You have gremlins and goblins, and they're gonna hate me for saying this kind of stuff. But you have what are the trolls and fairies, and you start getting into even werewolves and things like that, and vampires. So they're not as animalistic, and they start bordering on kind of more of folklore, which is fine because we do both of those, and I kind of think cryptids have a place for both. But let's just be honest, North America is cryptid. I mean, you've seen the meme. If I can find one, I'll throw it on the screen right here. The meme where it's what is it, European cryptids? It's oh, would you like to have a cup of tea? And then you have American cryptids, the sniper rifle and the military goggles. It's come at me, sucker. So North America and cryptids are peanut butter and jelly, I guess. So, yeah.
So whenever I was researching what cryptid I wanted to do, I at first was looking for some more international cryptids, but being that this was the initial start to a new season for Cryptids Across the Atlas, I wanted to start with a US based cryptid. And I realized we had never really talked about a cryptid from Arizona, because our goal, obviously in time, is to have every state at least represented by one cryptid. Obviously, we know that multiple states have multiple cryptids, like Arkansas, California, West Virginia, a lot of Texas. There are quite a few states that have multiple cryptids.
Does Texas have multiple cryptids? I guess it does.
Yeah, the chupacabra,
but that's okay. But chupacabra, let's be honest, isn't Texas claims the chupacabra, But like, yeah, like
But there's
we
also
covered the chupacabra too, and it wasn't Texas.
No,
that we
it
talked
wasn't.
about.
No, it was
New Mexico.
New Mexico, yeah. But there's also the Fort Worth monster, which I did talk about.
Oh yeah,
and it
yeah.
was-
Or Lake Worth. Is it Lake Worth?
Lake Worth, yes.
Lake Worth monster,
Lake Worth
yeah.
monster, because it's in Fort Worth.
Yes, got it.
But yeah,
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
yeah.
There's more than one. Okay, fair enough.
So
Carry on.
anyway, I was like, okay, well, we haven't done like a West Coast cryptid because last year we went on our East Coast cryptid tour, where we went, in the fall and went to like everywhere out east. And
Which
then
we have a lot of videos
Yes,
coming out about that.
we
by
still
the way.
need to
We have like a
publish
whole
those.
vlog series that we did that
Yeah.
we have got to edit, where we talked about like cryptid themed ice cream,
Mhm.
cryptid themed destinations. As a matter of fact, guys, this rock right here is actually from Dover, where the Dover demon is. This is from the
In
wall
Massachusetts.
that the Dover demon crawled across. I don't know if we were supposed to take that or not, but yeah. Anyway,
It was on the ground. Anyway, so last year we did our East Coast cryptid tour. The previous year we did West Coast cryptid. So we had a lot of West Coast cryptids 2 years ago. And last year it was very East Coast cryptid heavy. Like we had the Snallygaster and some West Virginia cryptids. And so I was like, okay, I want to take it back to the West Coast, or, western side of the country. We haven't
not exactly coastal, but
not
yeah.
coastal, but it's out west, and we hadn't done anything on Arizona. And whenever I think Arizona, there had been quite a few cryptids, but what was intriguing to me, that we hadn't done an Arizona cryptid, so that was already like, okay, I want to find something. But then also like the name, we kind of joked around in the beginning of like the name just in general was intriguing, because I was like, oh, the Mogollon monster, like it was a long name, like it had monster in the name, because not all cryptids have like monster in their title. And so
And
really,
let's be honest, it probably reminded you of the Falk monster,
Yeah.
which is like a hometown hero for
Yeah,
us,
and
being
so
from Arkansas. So
whenever I was looking into it, I was like, oh, this is like a Bigfoot type of cryptid. And those are always, everyone's favorites. Really, even if people don't know what cryptids are, whenever we talk about like, oh, we host a podcast, Cryptids Across the Atlas, and they're like, what's a cryptid? My first question back to them is, well, do you know what Bigfoot is or Sasquatch? And I'm like, oh yeah, I know what that is. And so it's an easily recognizable cryptid. And so yeah, it was the place first of all, and then the name, and then it just kind of spiraled from there.
okay, so to me though, so I get the privilege of editing all of our episodes, right? So that's my job, is I'm the editor. And that's why Elaine ends up writing more than I do, because it takes me so long to
You
edit.
also write and do the music. Like, you don't just edit the things.
Okay, yes, fair enough. All of the episodes. If Elaine's on the episode, she wrote the story. If I'm on the episode, I wrote the
But
story.
you do everything else.
But yeah, I do all the music production and all that. So anyway, about it, like, as I'm editing through this, the thing that stood out to me the most is this Sasquatch type encounter is very different from most of the Sasquatch encounters we've ever covered, because not only is it gray in a lot of the sightings, which it's not always gray, but it was gray in the first. Is that correct? Was it gray? It was like a gray color, right? Yeah, look that up. I think I'm pretty certain. We have our stories here too.
Yeah, we have our notes, because whenever we do these, it's like once we record them, we're like, okay, move on to the next one. We forget.
It's so easy to forget.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty certain he was gray and like long, shabby hair.
Yes.
Which reminds me of like almost like skunk ape, because some of the skunk ape stories have said to be gray
Which
and
I
long
do
and shabby.
mention skunk ape. In
Yes. And also the connection with the Boy Scouts. But the two things that were the wildest to me about the Mogollon monster were it's the first time we've ever covered a Sasquatch encounter where it has a weapon. So it's wielding.
It was brown, by the way, the first one.
Oh, was it brown? Whatever. It was gray at some point.
Yes.
But anyway. Well, it was gray in the face, like an old man.
Like, yes, aged.
Yes, aged. There we go. So I thought that was cool.
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is, like, the sighting depicts it holding a club. So to me, it almost starts kind of feeling like I almost said bambushka. That's the wrong word. What's the Russian the wild man, the Russian wild man? Anyway, figure that out. Babushka.
No, we did it. We did it. That was one of our earlier episodes, right?
Yeah, we did it. You did it. But I don't know why. I just think Russian word, and so it's just like a Russian mom now, or a Russian
I'm gonna
grandma.
have to Google it real quick. Just
So
because.
Whatever. And so not a Russian grandma. So it was anyway. So it has a club, which is not like that kind of. I think there may be some stories of a Tennessee wild man where it's bearing a club, but this honestly depicts it more as a wild man type of Sasquatch encounter. And the second thing is, so if you spoiler alert, if you haven't went back and listened to the original, like seriously, Chichunya, thank you. Yeah,
Siberian
it's like
Sasquatch.
Babushka and Chupacabra have a child. A Chichunya. What? No.
Chichunya.
No. I'm not editing these. These are unscripted, so it's staying. But anyway, whatever. So it has a club, and like I said, spoiler alert, if you haven't watched the original, like go watch that first, and then you'll kind of be caught up here. 3, 2, 1. Okay. So in the original encounter with it was I.W. Stevens,
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Ingvald Walter Stevens, and this is in the 30s. Yeah, 32. So he is, or no, 1901. And anyway, early 1900s. He has this encounter where he sees this thing on a ridge, right? They have this eye contact. He feels intimidated by it because it's holding a club, and they're like making eye contact, and he feels threatened. Obviously, this is actually a pretty common thing in a lot of Sasquatch encounters where you may not feel as if the Sasquatch is necessarily wanting to harm you, but you do feel like it feels like you're viewing something uncanny valley almost, I think is the way it's been depicted. Like the hair on your body stands up, like you feel like you're looking into a mirror, but it's like a funhouse mirror. Something like you can tell that there's like a sentience to it, but it's also like very unnatural and natural and like primordial or primitive in a way, but also more advanced. Anyway, so there's like this duality to the whole thing. So he's having this encounter. He raises his rifle up to shoot the creature out of fear. Is that correct? I think that's right. But at the same time, this is it a cougar? A mountain lion?
It's
a cougar.
Yeah.
So comes over the ridge and is like snarling at them both. And this cougar is actually acting like it's about to attack the Mogollon monster, which is also a really cool thing because I can't think of another cryptid experience where a cryptid is attacked by another creature, is about to be attacked by another creature. So Stevens actually turns his rifle and shoots the cougar instead to preserve the Mogollon monster because he realized this thing is more like him. And it's carrying this weapon, brandishing this weapon to defend itself, right? It has this wisdom about it. It has this agedness. It knows it needs something to defend itself against predators out here, which is wild because that implies that Bigfoot's, Bigfoot's, that's proper plural, can't speak, or Sasquatches need some form of defense against predators, just like you or I would. So he raised his rifle, he shoots the cougar, and the cougar, as he turns back to see the creature has run like beyond the rim. He can no longer see it. So he goes up and around. So you imagine you're like Grand Canyon. Mogollon Rim is on the Grand Canyon. Is that correct? Somewhere out in that. It's in the Grand Canyon area, right?
I'm pretty sure the Mogollon Rim is not. That's why it has a couple different names because IW's original story was in the Grand Canyon, but the Mogollon Rim is not around the Grand Canyon. It's completely separate. It's in Arizona, but it's a different trail. Like
okay. I
different. Yeah.
But anyway about it. So, but it's similar topography.
Yes. Yeah.
It's canyons and cliffs and red rock, right?
Yes.
With evergreens, I believe.
Yes.
So there's like a forested area, but it's much more mountainous. Like when we think of forested areas, we're from Arkansas, which is I don't know, you can call it east, you can call it west. I don't know what we are. We have like a West Coast mentality with an East Coast topography. I don't know. So, but we're very similar to Appalachia. So it's everything here. When you talk about forest, it's like dense, like machete, bushwhack, alligators and snakes and mosquitoes. And in the fall, it's like beautiful foliage and it's thick and lush. Out west, the forest,
deserted.
The forest is like there's a tree here and there's one over there, and it's very sparse. I'm generalizing. I know there's thick forests. Don't come at me, West Coasters. But it's not the same. So there is a forest, but it's more like lumbering evergreens and such. So there's a lot of room to kind of... Anyway, so he goes around the rim and he is trying to find the cougar. He goes up to he's approaching where he shot the cougar. And then he sees the creature is actually back and is bent over and is drinking the blood off of the ground from where the cougar had bled out from being shot by the rifle. So not only do we have my first experience from like a traditional cryptid story, I think I've actually read on my other show, The Cryptid Archives, some instances of Sasquatches having like throwing rocks and stuff. And I know throwing rocks and knocking trees is not uncommon for that, but like brandishing a club like weapon, like something that it actually took the time to tear out and create a weapon out of. And then also the first time that I can think of where a Sasquatch is drinking blood, which
like very vampiric.
Yes,
because that's what you would expect of the chupacabra.
Right. So you have like a vampiric and then also this intelligence. So it's a very interesting mashup for a cryptid. Now, I will say we have covered quite a few Sasquatch-like cryptids. I don't even know. Let's just try to go down the list real quick. Chuchunya. Okay, yes, Russia, the Siberian snowman.
Mm-hmm.
You have the Falk monster, which is here in Arkansas, which is very skunk ape-like, which, by the way, we've covered the skunk ape. We haven't covered Honey Island swamp monster, but that's on my list for which is basically skunk ape for Louisiana. We have covered. Oh, is there any other East Coast ones? Oh, what's the Chattawa monster? Which, funny inside story, Chattawa monster. Every time we talk about the Chattawa monster now, which is in Mississippi, we look up pronunciations ahead of time.
That's how I knew it was not Mogollon.
Yes. So we watch these YouTube videos on pronunciation. So if you're one of those creators that make pronunciation videos, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts, because we're from the South and we do our best. But we were watching this one for Chattawa because I had originally pronounced it Chattawa because I have like in Arkansas, we have a lot of Native American, I mean, similar to Mississippi, but like, you know, I think of like Apache, Cherokee, Chattawa. Like I think about Choctaw, like the way you would say some of these Native American names for things, but it's actually Chattawa. So anyway, kind of like Arkansas. Anyway, yeah, I remember kind of put that together. Anyway, so but we watched this video and it was this guy, this like same, he sounds French to me, but he does so many pronunciation videos, and he sung the name of it to help you. So it's Chattawa, Mississippi.
I think about that every time.
Every time we sing this around the house. So I just sang it for you.
It's an inside joke. And now whenever you go back and listen to that episode, or if you ever hear somebody talk about the Chattawa monster, the Chattawa monster, Yes. See, I can't even. You will think of that song. You will think of that song.
So Chattawa monster, he's the one that escaped from the train car and was like loose. The circus train car one. I actually really.
It's a really fun story.
But then we've done a lot of West Coast Bigfoots as well. I think of Walking Sam. Well, that's not West Coast, but that's desert. Okay, so that's north. That's northwest, so South Dakota. Now we've done the Mogollon monster. We've done the Yucca Man. Have we done any other? We haven't just covered Sasquatch yet, which is like
not
California.
Yeah, no. But we have done the Yucca Man.
Have we done any other West Coast? None in Colorado. There's so many.
Yeah, there are a lot.
Now I know on my other show, which, by the way, just real quick plug, if you like these stories and you want to hear them in like a more of a narrative format, so I'm bringing back the Cryptid Archives, which if you're watching on YouTube, it's all still right here. If you're listening to this in the podcast, find it in the show notes because it is a separate channel, and I'm going to start mixing in these original encounter stories. So we'll have like 3 pieces of content around each of the cryptids we cover. So we'll have the original story, the full length on Cryptids Across the Atlas. We'll have these Cryptids Unscripted, and we'll have a Cryptid Archive episode that's like the original encounter, but like in a narrative first person format. So it's a fun way to kind of like experience more of the story
in different formats.
Yeah. There's also some other stories in there that I pull from like old internet archives. So I know I've covered some other West Coast Bigfoot encounters, and I'm going to be covering more of them because there's a ton of encounters like on the old GCBRO and BFRO websites and cryptid forums. So the reason I get into all that, there is like a stark difference in the way an East Coast Bigfoot and a West Coast Bigfoot behave. West Coast Bigfoots have like this weird, like ominous, like I am here and you see me and then you don't, but it's like, where did it go? And like, I think of the Yucca Man, like it's literally hiding underground in these bunkers and out of sight. And then you have the East Coast Bigfoots that are like, they have this stench about them and this a little more violence to them. Like the West Coast ones typically have had like more like chill, like I am here. And the East Coast ones, you have like some crazy ones, but then you have the Mogollon, which is kind of like, I'm still categorizing it West Coast, but you also see some of the hunting instincts of maybe more of the natural behavior of a Sasquatch like creature, where it has seen a fresh kill and it's a hunter gatherer, right? So we know that they're gatherers. Well, we don't know anything. let me back up. We're very neutral on this show, but Bigfoot is one that I personally do believe in. But, we have the whole putting out of the apples and stuff. And I've seen some very convincing evidence around like leaving trinkets and getting trinkets back from that. So we know they have the gathering side, but to see some of the hunting side is kind of cool.
Which I will say, whenever we went to the Grand Canyon, I actually I did this video on the Mogollon monster, just talking, like highlighting the episode on our social media. But in the video, I actually uploaded a photo, and I'm pretty sure I've done this as a singular photo on social media as well. But whenever we were at the Grand Canyon a couple years ago on our West Coast Cryptid tour, there was actually an apple on a post.
I forgot about that.
Yeah. And so like that is a legitimate thing. People really do that. And like it was kind of cool to see in person, like somebody left an apple.
I also had an amazing encounter where me and this crow had a conversation for like 5 minutes, and it would like walk a little bit, and then I would walk and I would make noises at it and it would respond. And like we just had a very intimate moment together, and it was beautiful. And I think I have that video somewhere that I can like work into this, but I don't know. That's completely unrelated.
It just reminds me of that channel. The crows are here.
Yes. Anyway, I have a thing for crows. So it was a beautiful crow, and it was my favorite crow I've ever encountered, and it was in Arizona. So Arizona, you got good crows. Anyway, so I.W. Stevens has his encounter. First time that this is like documented. First time, like I said, for those two types of encounters, tells us a whole lot about the potential of the behavior of these types of creatures. But you go on, you actually have one of your titles where it says Grand Canyon Wild Man. That kind of, I don't know, just the assimilation there to the Tennessee Wild Man.
Mm-hmm.
So let's kind of move on from the original, which you had mentioned Sam Spade. Tell me a little bit more about that whole thing.
Yeah, so it's kind of confusing, or at least when I was doing my research, it was confusing because the last name Spade kept coming up, but there was a couple different names. And so I even mentioned this in the story. So the first story that I'd found, aside from IW's story, was an early Arizona pioneer named Sam Spade. The confusion starts, though, is that there's a William Spade and there's a Bill Spade. And I even talk about how, like, Bill is a common nickname for William. So, like, are they one and the same? Are all these Spades one person, or is this, a father-son story? And so I kind of go on to talk about a little bit of each of these stories, whether it's all one big story or whether it's, a couple different stories. But one is actually kind of gruesome. So according to one of these stories, it says Spade's son, Bill Spade. So if you're following Sam Spade, according to this story, his son was Bill Spade. So the story about Bill Spade was that him and his soon-to-be wife had allegedly met a tragic fate at the hands of this monster, and they were killed on their wedding day. And it, the details were kind of gruesome and really just horrific. And it kind of made, like, the Mogollon monster a villain, like a very, like, terrorized, like, how would you even describe that? Like,
well, it's a monster. It's putting the monster in
it's
monster,
a
like
predator. Yeah.
Well, it's kind of like how the Falk monster is depicted in Legend of Bogey Creek, where he like goes. I think it's the second one. I don't remember if it's the first one or the second one. It's been a long time since I've seen these movies. Which, just for anyone curious, the Falk monster is Falk, Arkansas. It's one of the most prominent Sasquatch encounter stories in the world, and there were two B-level, I guess, documentaries that ended up kind of like blowing up and becoming cult classics based on this monster. But in one of them, it's depicted actually going in and ripping a guy out of a porta potty and like throwing him or something like that. I could be like mixing it, but he took him out of the porta potty. And so like has like a violent behaviors that also carries over into some of the skunk apes. So that's what I was saying. Like, it's weird because the Mogollon monster has some of that violent tendencies, which you don't hear in a lot of Sasquatch encounters. Now, I do want to talk about this Sam Spade character for a minute. because it's weird. So as you wrote your story, in which you write your story and then I edit it and I'm listening to it or whatever, I was curious about this Sam Spade guy. I'm going and researching and trying to find photos and stuff for all of you watchers rather than listeners. So if you're not watching and you ever want to like kind of get a deeper dive and understanding of like what the place looks like and what some of these people, who these people were and stuff, we add in tons of photos and videos and such into our episodes. So just a little encouragement to watch rather than listen. But I went to try to find this Sam Spade person, and what I found out was Sam Spade is a fictional character who was a protagonist in the 1930 novel Maltese Falcon. And he's kind of this like goes by his own playbook, kind of detective-y, cunning, almost kind of gives me like a bit of a MacGyver feel. I haven't read Maltese Falcon. Maltese Falcon. But he has kind of this MacGyver-y kind of vibe to him. And apparently he kind of became a Huckleberry Finn type of character where a lot of stories kind of get tied to him in these fictionalized ideas to just kind of like have fun campfire tales. Now, I don't see a direct connection to this same Sam Spade fictional character to the Mogollon monster, at least in my research that I did, which albeit wasn't nearly as extensive as yours because mine was just trying to find extra content to add to the episode for people. So I don't know if that is one of these tales or if Sam Spade became a familiar name that they tied to, even though you said there's like William Spade and stuff
Bill
like that, and
Spade,
Bill
yeah.
Spade, or if it's two separate people and it just happens to have a similar name, which like I kind of chalk that up to how like you're not the girl who sang Baby Shark, but her name is also
Elaine Johnson.
Elaine Johnson. So it could just be someone with that's the same name. Like that is a complete possibility. But just something that people know, like when you're studying cryptids, it is a very fine line. It's playing a game of telephone, like online. So we do a lot of our research with newspapers.com or like local town archives that we go and trudge through these documents to find what was actually said, the original encounters, because it really is a game of telephone. One person will say one thing, and then that reporter reports on it, and then somebody reports on that reporter's article, and then somebody goes and makes a video about that internet, clipping based on that reporter's investigation into what this reporter, reported about what that person said. And so things tend to shift a little bit and change. And so we really are having to constantly go through and try to weed out. Sometimes we miss stuff. Sometimes we legitimately miss stuff because it's near impossible to weed through some of this stuff, especially because, just like our new segment, Fact, Folklore, and Fraud, a lot of it is folklore or fraud, and it's trying to weed out the facts in the midst of that. But also, like, I don't want to say that in a bad way because I find beauty in that. So, maybe the Sam Spade guy really did have an encounter with the Mogollon monster. Maybe it was just a fictional retelling for campfire tales.
Which I am glad that you brought that up because we had a couple people have asked us before since we've had the show and have left comments, and there was even a recent comment on Spotify because you can leave comments on each episode, which let us know how you like this Cryptid's unscripted format, if you want to hear more of these or if you just want the fully produced episode. But somebody had left a recent comment on our Spotify episode. I don't even remember which episode it was, but they were basically saying like, where are you getting your research from? And on our website for every episode, we actually list all of the articles and videos and resources underneath the story. So if you ever want to research these things for yourself, obviously, there's no way we could upload every single article, every single book, every single text ever written about these cryptids, but we do utilize, we do share all of our resources that we use for each of these episodes because, the goal of Cryptids Across the Atlas isn't to tell you what to believe. It's not to tell you that cryptids are in fact 100% real or they're not real. That is not the goal of the show. The goal is to have all of the facts and the fiction, the hoaxes, all of these encounter stories and bring them to the table of this narrative story for you to come up with your own belief system about these cryptids or, any specific cryptid. because people who listen to our shows aren't just believers, they're skeptics. And then some people just love spooky campfire stories. And so I did actually respond to the Spotify comment, was like, hey, you know, we put all of our links on each episode on our website. But also I had mentioned that it's sometimes hard to know what's real and what isn't. And sometimes we'll write a story and different articles will contradict each other. You know, we may say something in an episode about a specific cryptid, and then, you know, later on in the episode, we say something that completely negates what we had just said. But that's part of what cryptids are. There's so much unknown. There's so much, you know, back and forth. And like Cody said, like, you know, the phone game where it's like there was this encounter, but then somebody tells it differently, and then somebody remembers it differently, and somebody hears it differently. And like there's so many things that it's like it really is hard to know what is factual and what is fictional. But I'm glad that you brought that up, because I wanted to mention that, you know, we share our research. So if you ever want to be like, oh, how did they, you know, come up with this story? Or even, you know, whenever we started doing our recent segment of the fact, folklore, fraud, you know, we are basing this off of everything that we have found. But there's so many other resources that we may not even have access to. And something that we have found in doing this show is that a lot of times people don't come forward with their stories because people won't believe them, you know, or that they'll make fun of them and mock them. And so they don't even come forward with their stories. And so sometimes, you know, we do all this research, and, you know, other podcasts that talk about cryptids and researchers and investigators, you know, will come forth with all this research, but it's still incomplete because there's still some people who are like, actually, that is not what happened. It happened this way, or this creature looked differently. And so it's kind of hard to really, you know, pull 100% what something is or what it isn't.
So I like that you mentioned that too, because there's one other like key piece here that I hear people kind of like dogging on or asking questions about, and AI has really muddied up the water with this too. So no, we do not use AI to write our stories. Our stories are handwritten by us. I will on occasion have AI do a little bit of deep research to help find its own research, and then I will compare it to my research. But specifically, I follow the lead that it gives and then go to the actual source to figure that information out. So using it to pull, kind of like you would use Google. But I have noticed that AI has this terrible problem with hallucinating. And so it will just make up encounter stories and will just completely like fabricate, like, oh yeah, so-and-so was mauled by a pack of Bigfoot. Like, yeah, man, like they ripped their hair out and tied it to a tree. Like, it'll just make up the most random stuff. And I know that sounds dramatic, but it really will, because you'll be like, give me all the encounter stories. And it'll just start spitting out blatant lies that it creates. And then if you call it out on it, it'll be like, yeah, I fabricated a little bit of that. But there's this other story, and it'll repeat itself. And it lies. It makes up its own stuff. And I am not against AI. I'm an advocate for proper use of it. You know, we use it properly, I feel like, on this show, much to some people's dismay. Some people hate it, but, you know, it is what it is, because there's a lot of these stories that have no encounters. And so being able to plug in someone's description of a creature and have it generate like this basic image, like you see, my thumb points the wrong way, over there. If I just look at the TV and point, I wouldn't have to look at the camera screen and figure out where I'm pointing. That like is an AI, you know, rendition of what the original encounter story, or I guess a culmination of both the encounter stories, looked like. And that's an easy way of creating something for people to have a visual reference to kind of get an idea for that. The problem is when things start hallucinating, when people start pulling facts from stuff like this, it's really interesting, because I'm super curious how some of these cryptid tales or cryptid experiences, mind you, are going to evolve deeper into fiction, because it's no longer people's imaginations or having to pick apart fact and folklore, or pick apart, you know, someone, the way they remember a story versus how they actually, you know, what they actually saw. We know that the mind has a tendency to hallucinate as well, especially whenever it's in fight or flight mode. So we see something and we tend to grow it out of its means. Like, for instance, one time I saw this insanely large black cat running through our property. Very much looked like the size of a panther. It was probably just a neighborhood cat. I have no idea. But, like most likely my mind fictionalized the size of this. It was late. I'd heard a weird noise. I went outside. I saw it run. I still think it was probably some kind of panther, but, who knows? It was most likely just a house cat or something. Go ahead. You say something.
No, I was going to say with that, I always also tell people or ask people, if you have resources that you trust, like, please give them to us, because newspapers.com can only have so much information, and some of these things aren't even documented. So if you have, certain research tools that you use, or if you have your own photos of these certain cryptids, if you have your own experiences and like you were out in the woods and took these photos, like, please send them to us. We would love to use, real footage of these things and not just, AI created images of
the Cryptid Atlas at gmail.com.
Yeah.
You can send whatever over, even artwork. We'll feature your artwork on our show. We love to feature artwork for cryptids that people create. So, to summarize that, like, I'm super interested to see how AI is going to impact the future of cryptid encounters, because it, in its own way, adds to the story, because it's creating something that AI has been programmed to make something that's enjoyable for us as humans to read and to try to digest. And so it's embellishing stories and adding details that aren't there. And so we're going to have an even harder time distinguishing fact from fraud the more these AI robots start adding in their own little embellishments, and the more that kind of content starts getting regurgitated across the internet. So,
well, and just one more thing to encap that. I actually mentioned this in the story of, obviously, Wikipedia, like, that is not our main source of information, but it can be a good source of information. But even pre-AI, like, that has always been the issue with Wikipedia. Anybody can go in and change the information. And so, like, that's just something to be mindful of. Or, like, even when you have your research.
The issue with Reddit, anyone can go and make up a story because it's entertaining, right? And so trying to distinguish what someone actually saw versus what they're just saying to get likes on the internet. But, I mean, it's even like, so Don Davis was one of the kids who had, what was the story? Do you remember the story? I know it's in the episode. So the story, so Don Davis was 13. I know that. I remember that much. He was 13.
It was so it was in the mid 1940s during a Boy Scout camping trip near Payson, Arizona. And Don Davis was 13 at the time and had an encounter with this Mogollon monster. So he had heard rustling noises moving through the campsite. He thought it was just another, fellow Boy Scout. But then he noticed a massive looming figure standing over his sleeping bag. And in his words, the creature was huge. Its eyes were deep set and hard to see, but they seemed expressionless. His face seemed pretty much devoid of hair, but there seemed to be hair along the sides of his face. His chest, shoulders, and arms were massive, especially the upper arms, easily upwards of 6 inches in diameter, perhaps much, much more. I could see he was pretty hairy, but didn't observe really how thick the body hair was, but the face and head were very square, with square sides and a squared up chin like a box. And so he was terrified of this creature, so he yanked his sleeping bag right back over his head.
As we all do when we're terrified of any bump of the night. Ever slept in a tent? That's some false security right there for you.
And his heart was just pounding, and then he just literally waited in his sleeping bag until the presence went away. But that very moment changed everything for him, because with that, into his adulthood, he became a lifelong researcher and cryptozoologist.
So it's funny because I had a bit of a hard time finding anything about Don Davis whenever I was like on my secondary pass through trying to do research for this. And I think the reason is, what I've kind of come to realize is, he was kind of a cryptozoologist, but according to, I found an article on BigfootEncounters.com, which is apparently Don Davis's last writing. So I'm just going to read you this little bit at the bottom. It says, Don Davis was involved casually as a witness, investigator, and researcher in the field of cryptozoology since before Bernard Heuvelmans coined the term. The article appearing here, which I'll link it in the show notes here, is the first draft for a chapter of a book he was preparing about some of his more interesting Bigfoot experiences. Sadly, Don died in February of 2002, and the article was his last work to see print. So what I realized is this was a very real experience. Don Davis was actually a real human, and he was preparing all of this work, but he passed away before he could finish culminating all of his encounters. And so there's things like that, right? Like a lot of these experiences were happening with the industrial boom of the United States, and so much was changing and more people were moving into more remote areas. And so they were witnessing more and more things, and they didn't have the internet. So many of these stories are passed down verbally, and we have lost them, or they've changed a little bit, or some of them honestly are just now resurfacing. There's writings that people have discovered, encounter stories and such that have never before been documented that are seeing the light of day again because it was just a journal entry in someone's, journal that got tucked away in a trunk for, great grandpa's old belongings. So it's very interesting, the not prevalence, but the purveyance, what's the right word I'm trying to say? Basically the passing on of information happens, and how it's our jobs collectively to try to pick through this to get a better understanding of the world around us. And, I think back to like journal entries for the original sightings of like kangaroos. Like, yeah, these jacked creatures walking through the sand that look like humans that could, like basically wrestle me down, like these weird humanoid creatures. Or like, yeah, this place is full of dragons that spew venom from their mouth. Like there were these creatures before we were actively at these places that were now we just know them as kangaroos or Komodo dragons
that used to be cryptids.
And so we're still trying to figure that out for a lot of these, and there could be explanations of their that we already know, or maybe a new explanation altogether. And hey, maybe super AI will come along and be able to prove the existence of some of these cryptids, but right now there's a lot of investigative research, and you really have to wear your skepticism hat and not your tinfoil hat walking into some of these, because, oh man, there's as much looking for fame as there is looking for truth out there.
Sometimes to me, though, wearing the tinfoil hat is more fun.
Yes. When they ask me, why do you believe in all these things? And I say, well, first of all, I haven't told you if I believe in this one or not. And second of all, let's just be honest. It's way more fun to believe than to not. So with that, I think this concludes our first episode of Cryptids Unscripted. Be sure to go and follow the Cryptid Archives to hear the firsthand, kind of like narrative version of the original encountered by Stevens. And then also be looking forward for our next episode on Cryptids Across the Atlas, where we're going to talk about the White River Monster, which I have found has been one of the most well documented, at least from like a publicity standpoint, cryptids that I've seen in a long time. So I'm excited to bring that one to y'all. And with that, yes, keep your eyes open. You never know what you might see just on the edge of the road.